Joanna Macy mentored me for a week in 2010, and some of you know that she died last summer, and when she died, I found myself really emotional. She was an engaged Buddhist, an innovative thinker, ecologist, activist, writer, and teacher, and she has left a huge legacy to the world. 2 weeks ago, some of you may recall the homily by Reverend Fiona Heath on Earth Blessings and her reference to Joanna Macy. It was a great lead-in to a deeper dive into some of Joanna's work, and I might also mention, so was Mike's poem. Today, I will talk about the ideas behind what Joanna called the work that reconnects. Although we humans are made from the earth, just like everything else on the planet, our societal fixation on industrial growth has alienated us from our deep connection with Earth. We consume what we call resources at unsustainable rates and use the planet to dispose of the waste byproducts of growth. As a consequence, we're now risking the collapse of both Earth's living systems and our social ones. And this collapse is what Joanna called the Great Unraveling. Perhaps, though, with people acting as change agents, we can avoid a complete unraveling and instead go through a great turning towards a life-sustaining society. And this is the work that reconnects, reconnecting us to the living earth and to ourselves. Today I will cover 3 things: my connection with Joanna, the structure and content of the work that reconnects, and finally, what insights it can offer for the present moment. So over 30 years ago, I encountered Joanna's work on despair. People felt anger, fear, and grief about nuclear threats and environmental destruction, but these feelings were not being acknowledged as normal responses. Through group exercises, she helped participants realize they were not alone, nor were they crazy. And one such exercise that I participated in was a council of all beings, shown here. During the workshop, we spent time outside waiting to be called by a being. We then inhabited that being, making a mask to assist with losing our human identity, and opened our hearts to hear messages that beings wanted to impart to humankind. I was called to become Snake and brought back a message to humans about shedding our skins and adopting new ways. Collectively during that council, all of us beings shared much wisdom. That exercise showed we accessed our heart and mind through experience, not lectures. Experiential practice was at the heart of Joanna's teaching method. By paying attention to the forest, we saw the wonder of life, and by paying attention, we were in the present moment and could feel gratitude. And even more, when we became another being, we realized our interconnectedness in the web of life. We moved from our small selves to our Gaian, or ecological selves. Our consciousness shifted. We each stopped identifying solely as a separate, fragile ego, and instead recognized ourselves as a functional, interconnected part of the larger living earth of Gaia. We understood that our identity does not end at our skin, but extends to include the air, trees, water, and all living beings. That was just one of Joanna's practices, and she incorporated many more in the work that reconnects. So, the Industrial Growth Society. The Industrial Growth Society wants us to be disconnected, to be numb, to not feel our grief, our fear, our anger at the losses to the planet. It wants us to feel powerless without agency, even though we see the signs of the great unraveling and the collapse of social and ecological systems. The Industrial Growth Society wants us to ignore them. It's in the interests of the corporate, military, industrial complex to keep us consuming, to keep us disconnected from the planet, even though that is leading us to the great unraveling. If we are to sustain life, it's essential that we shift away from the Industrial Growth Society to a life-sustaining one. To do so requires more than technology, more than policy shifts. It requires a spiritual renewal, a change in consciousness, that reconnection to the earth. And this is a great turning away from the processes that are destroying life, and instead towards a view of the earth as a massive system of which we humans are one part. The earth is living through us and other species. Joanna called the great turning the adventure of our time. The work that reconnects is aimed at undoing the social conditioning that led us to build the Industrial Growth Society, and then through a rich and diverse collection of practices and meditations, foster the changes in consciousness so that we can transform into a life-sustaining society. Group work is essential for the work that reconnects. Joanna says, the pain is too much to bear alone. The work is a spiral. So anytime you hear the work that reconnects discussed, it's in the context of that spiral. Like the dandelion shown here, spiraling from sprouted seed and root to the puffball, spreading seeds anew. The journey from pain and despair through empowered action is not a linear start to finish process. It can continue onwards and outwards, inviting us to go through the stages of the spiral again and again. Each time, through powerful experiential practices, we're strengthened and find increasing clarity, increasing conviction, increasing courage. So the next slides go into more detail about the 4 stages of the work that reconnects on the spiral. So we start with gratitude. Joanna stressed gratitude as a thread throughout her work. Love and pain, she said, are 2 sides of the same coin. The first practices are always the practice of gratitude. Gratitude for being alive at this time, right now, paying attention, gratitude for the wonder of life, and gratitude for our own strengths, our own capacities that we bring. Gratitude requires us to pause and be in this moment, and that loosens the grip of the Industrial Growth Society, which wants us to be dissatisfied with where we're at right now. Joanna used to say, gratitude is a revolutionary act. The second stage of honoring our pain for the world is what helped make Joanna well known. Our grief, our anger, our fear cannot change if we run from them. It was radical for Joanna to suggest that we sit with those feelings. She developed a multitude of group practices for this stage of the processes, depending on the length of time available and the setting. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Some of you may recall that Amanda did one of Joanna's practices last year called the Truth Mandala. We sat in a circle, and in the middle, she placed 4 objects: dead leaves, a stick, a stone, and an empty bowl. And those objects represented our sorrow, anger, fear, and our emptiness or numbness. Anyone who wanted could enter the circle, pick an object or objects, and use that as a gateway into voicing our deepest feelings. That practice of honoring our pain for griefs in our own lives, and our pain for the wider world, that practice is an essential part of the work that reconnects. Seeing with new eyes. In this stage, we shift. Instead of seeing the earth as resource with our new eyes, we understand that we are embedded in the sacred living body of the earth, and that what we do to her, we do to ourselves. We see with new understanding our physical connections, our social connections to each other, and through time to past ancestors and future descendants. With this stage, as with previous ones, Joanna developed some powerful practices to help us see our connections with new eyes and to help us see our own role and our potential. Going forth is the final stage of the spiral before the whole spiral begins again. As we become more aware of our connection with Earth, we may want to take action, and Joanna distinguished 3 types of action. Holding actions might be protests or injunctions, like the protests at Goldstream's Park. That was a holding action to stop further ecological damage. Alternative structures are things like new ways of organizing, such as food share co-ops, car share co-ops, or new legislation, such as giving rights to nature that are equal to the rights of a person. And the 3rd type of action is encouraging or facilitating shifts in consciousness, such as changing attitudes to support giving rights to nature. The spiral's never finished, and we're constantly starting over, and we can be in multiple parts of the spiral at the same time. I want to finish by talking a little about Joanna's perspective on hope. We've already heard that word today, and living with uncertainty. As I mentioned, she was very strong on gratitude and being present in this moment. She said once that asking about whether she felt hopeless or hopeful or optimistic was a waste of time. The point is, she said, to be fully present in this current moment. She talked of active hope. Hope isn't something that we hold, but rather it is how we act, what we do. We act for the sake of love, even if we can't see the results. Being guided by intention to act for the earth's healing makes it easier to face our pain, and our lives become more meaningful regardless of the outcome. We can be strengthened by uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to new ideas, to creativity, to awakening. We don't know the effect that we will have on others or the things that we want to influence, just as others may not know the effect that they've had on us, and that is certainly true for me. In Buddhism, the don't know mind is an open, present moment awareness, free from preconceived judgment. And that goes back to Joanna being a Buddhist. The don't know mind fosters curiosity and direct experience over intellectual analysis. It allows us to respond to life with greater clarity and compassion, rather than clinging to preconceived ideas. Joanna said that we do the work that reconnects so that if things do fall apart or unravel, the people will become more resilient and that we will become good caretakers of each other rather than turning on each other. Doing the work that reconnects is aimed at transforming people to move beyond their small selves and connect with larger purpose. We must teach ourselves now to serve the whole. Even if we don't succeed, we will live better. Joanna encourages us to be of service no matter what or how. She said, if we're going to go down, let's do it well. So this is one of Joanna's legacies, and you can Google the work that reconnects. This is a network spread across the planet with facilitators offering workshops in over 20 countries. And since 2017, over 250 facilitators have been trained. And I was trained in 2010, so there's a 7-year period in that time when even more were trained. And the website, the work that reconnects.org, shows that there's a vibrant community continuing Joanna's work. Some closing thoughts with Joanna's words, and this was the last slide. The main thing is that you're showing up, that you're here, and that you're finding ever more capacity to love this world, because it will not be healed without that. And it is 10 to 11, and I had wondered about taking a minute or so to do this elm dance. Are we good for one more minute?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so maybe just show the next slide, Pedro, and we'll... So, Joanna took the elm dance with her to workshops she was leading with a Russian-speaking team in areas poisoned by the Chernobyl disaster. There, and especially in a city called Novosibirsk, the most contaminated of inhabited cities, the elm dance became an expression of their will to live. And it's since become a central element of the Reconnecting to Life workshop. She does it everywhere, or did it everywhere. And it gives activists and lovers of life the world over a tangible way to feel their solidarity across the miles.